questions. No spoilers, I'm talking to one particular person, and she knows who she is. But if you have questions for either of us, you can direct them to both of us or just one of us. You can raise your hands and we'll call on you.
If you do kill a character, I'm not saying that you did, but if you did kill a character, how do you feel about it? Do you feel mad at yourself because you feel attached to that character, or you do you feel happy because ha ha ha, I'm making a little feel bad? What do you feel?
I feel very attacked right now. Do you want to answer this one? Or do you want, I will answer it for you.
I think it was directed to you, somebody in particular.
Do you want to give it a shot though?
Sure. So, I guess I have mixed feelings because those scenes can be really powerful, and it's kind of fun to write powerful scenes, when you get into really emotional times. But it can also be sad, and it can be tough too. But if I kill a character, there's a reason for it. So I don't feel bad because my goal isn't to keep the reader happy all the time. My goal is to tell a really good story, and sometimes death is part of that.
And do you know far in advance that someone's going to die when you're writing?
Not necessarily. I outline, but sometimes my outlines change, so sometimes I know in advance.
Yeah, so I knew from before I wrote the first book, for the most part, who was going to live or who was going to die. There was one character who was set to die, and that character ended up surviving. So that was a change. But I don't feel bad because I made them in a very narcissistic, godlike way. So I can control if they live or die. I remember the first character I killed, though, was in a screenplay that I wrote when I was about 20 years old. And I remember sitting at my computer, and I knew this character. It was a modern-day adaptation of Wuthering Heights, and the character is based on Heathcliff, so he was going to die at the end, and I knew it the whole time. And I remember sitting at my computer just sobbing, and then wondering, why are the back of my hands wet? And it was because I was crying so hard, my tears were soaking the back of my hands. So even if we know it's going to happen, it can still be sad. But other questions? Oh, that was for the gentleman in the hat and the glasses.
Oh, okay. No, this is more of a spoiler-free question. When you do, both of you have self-published, right? Okay, so what's the most difficult thing? Is it physical or digital to market, or is it what do you find a little more difficult to get which is a stronger seller and it's more difficult to market, the physical product or the digital product?
I'm going to say that marketing is easy compared to writing the book itself. My struggle is with just getting it on the page. So once it's out there, it tends to be easier because it exists. But what's your experience?
When it comes to physical or digital, so you mean like a book you can feel or like an ebook? I think for me, marketing physical products tends to be more difficult, but that's probably because most of my marketing is online and that lends itself to digital. So I imagine if I did more in-person stuff, it would be opposite.
Yeah, and it's kind of different markets too, because kids can't, I say that, but most kids don't take Kindles to school, but they do take physical books. So there's a big difference between adult readers and younger adult readers.
Yeah, sorry, I have a follow-up. It's tougher to, you see that the indie bookstores ranking in smaller markets, or did they get to Austin, Dallas, Houston, or are there any smaller towns that have kind of bookstores like this?
So Leander just opened one, and we haven't even been there yet. We were just talking about it yesterday that we're planning on going to. I live in Leander, so I was thrilled. I know we hear a lot about bookstores closing, but they're still opening too.
Yeah, there's one in Georgetown that just opened not too long ago.
Yeah.
It's got the Larkin
I heard
and
about
Powell.
that. It's
So
supposed to be great.
Yeah, so they're popping up. And obviously Malvern's doing great, and we love
Yeah.
them, so everyone comes to Malvern. Yes, young lady in the pink shirt.
How can you think of stuff that could happen in all of your books?
Go ahead, answer that.
Oh goodness, it's always hard to tell where ideas come from. Sometimes it comes through wrestling and thinking, and then sometimes I just kind of know what it's supposed to be, and it changes from book to book. So I don't know. Some people say it's through dreams. I've never dreamed a book. I don't know. I just use my imagination, and eventually I get there.
Yeah, and for my books, I'm drawing real heavily from Shakespeare. So in the first page of my first book, there are 3 quotes from Hamlet. Even Not a Mouse Stirred is from Hamlet. There are a lot of things in there that I kind of mine and then twist into something new. So there's a conversation in the chapter from Trouble Fires Burn between Alden the Gravedigger where they talk about sense, and they have this little back and forth about senses. And that's because Hamlet's first line in that scene is about, and if I were an actor I'd have it memorized, but I'm not, it was about like the person who's the gravedigger having sense or not. So I took that one word and then expanded on it. I do sit when I'm watching live Shakespeare plays and think about how am I going to use stuff. So we were watching Much Ado About Nothing by Shakespeare Dallas, and there's a line in that that's die to live. And my husband and I kind of looked at each other and he was like, chapter title? And I was like, chapter title. So there are things like that that we get ideas from. Also, I highly recommend the theater company Rosedale Shakespeare, which puts on Free or Pay What You Will plays over at Ramsey Park. They're doing Love's Labor's Lost coming up, and I saw their Cymbeline and also was thinking of things where, would this be a chapter title? Would this be dialogue? Like, how can I work this into what I'm writing? And it's a lot of fun to think that way. Yes?
So sometimes, like, today seems like a good day for Jeffy to die.
Today seems like a good day for this character to die, you mean?
Yeah. Is that a spoiler-related question?
No.
Okay.
There are no characters named Jeffy.
No.
Okay.
No. I wouldn't say it's quite like that. Like, I do put more thought into it in advance.
I feel like you should make friends with the young lady
Yes, you
behind
probably
you.
should.
You can complain about authors killing your favorite characters.
So you both wrote trilogies. Did you initially intend them to be a trilogy when you started, or was it one book and then you thought of book 2 and 3? And then I could, kind of as a separate question, is it, once you've written that trilogy, is it hard to get out of it and start a new world, or is it easier to continue and kind of build on that same world outside of the trilogy?
You want to go first?
You go first.
So I work in screenwriting mode where everything is a 3-act structure. And I knew going into this that it was going to follow a traditional 3-act structure, follow the same structure as the original Star Wars trilogy, where there's the false problem and the false solution at the end of the first book or movie. The ending of the second one was, I even referred to the ending of my second book as the Han Solo Frozen in Carbonite sequence, where it has that kind of cliffhanger. So that was what I had in mind going into it. Those of you who talk to me in real life know that I have a 4th book coming out that's set in the same imaginary world. It's called Caliban and the Void. There's not a release date yet, it's still way out there. But that's, I think, proof that it's hard to get out of the fictional universe once you're already in it. I've already begun making plans for a new fictional universe based on the works of another author, and that one is proving to be exponentially more difficult. And I'm not sure if it's because I've been in the Shakespeare mindset for so long, or if that one just has new difficulties that I have to overcome, but it's comfortable being where you know.
I figured out really early on that mine would be a trilogy, and I think with fantasy, when you're building this entire world, it just lends itself to a longer storyline, and so each of my books 1 and book 2 each have a very definite ending, but it's all part of this longer storyline. And then I did add my prequel novella, but that was more from, honestly, kind of a marketing standpoint, like let's give people an easy entry to the series if they want something short to read. I was really ready to move on to a new world. I felt like I learned so much writing this first series, and I was ready to take what I'd learned and make something entirely new with it. And I'm really, really excited about the new world that I've got for the series I'm working on right now. It's really cool.
Yes.
Do you get your inspiration for characters from real life?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, it depends on the character, but I would say, especially with major characters, yes. And some of it's from me even. I mean, I can look at certain major characters I've had, and there are certain things that connect really strongly with me. But then I've got a major character in my next series that is kind of like my husband, and so yeah.
Yeah, me too. I read, my books are actually in dual protagonist, 3rd-person limited perspectives. And I just read about Alda today, but my other main character is named Drang, and he's very much based on my husband to the point where my husband will say stuff, and I will jot it down and then use it later in my house. And this is something that's been going on throughout history. Like, Mary Shelley supposedly based Victor Frankenstein on her husband Percy, so we're always stealing people, and they're little interesting sayings. I don't think that I would want to say that a character is completely based on someone from real life, because we try to make our characters a little bit more interesting than how, no offense, how you are most of the time. Yes.
Okay, so let's say.
Oh no, I know what you're gonna ask. I will talk to you about this afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it involves a spoiler, right? Okay. We'll get some coffee. Yeah.
Do you know the end of the series from? Did you know the end of the series from the very beginning? Like of the first book, or?
I do, but there's a lot about that that changes. But I always know at least kind of, you know, the general endpoint that I'm going towards. But I mean, that might not be anything more than like kind of knowing who wins and a little bit about who wins. But that there's been so many shifts along the way that how that happens changes.
Yeah. I knew, with the exception of the one character who I allowed to live, I knew pretty much exactly what was going to happen. And I planted a bunch of stuff in the first book. Even the part that I read out loud, it was full of things that were planting that come up in the very last chapter of the last book. So I had to be very well organized. There's a part in the first book where Dreng says something at the end of a scene, and then that exact same thing that he says comes up again in a future scene, and it was supposed to be foreshadowing. A lot of times in screenwriting, we call that gun in the first act. It's a rule where if you have something important happening in the first act of a story, it's going to come up again in the third act. So it's a foreshadowing technique. And I was very aware of that. I was also very aware I could not go back and fix things once it was published. Which you released yours all the same time, though, right?
Almost all the same. Yeah, I did it within about 3 weeks, so I was able to go back and see some stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't do that. I had to commit once it was out. Yes.
Who are the end characters who live?
That's a spoiler question. You know her across the aisle from you. You can talk to her afterwards, and she will ruin the entire book for you. I think we have time for one more question. Is there anyone who wants to ask another? Yeah.
What do y'all do? What's your process? Like, do you make yourself write every single day in the morning, or I know a little bit about what Amber does, but you can tell everyone else too.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. So it depends what I'm doing. You know, at some point I might be drafting, and at some point I might be editing, and I might be making an audiobook. And then before I release, I'm focusing heavily on marketing. But I mostly work while my kids are at school because this is my job. So I usually try to get started around, like at least at my desk around 9, and I don't usually take a lot of breaks until it's time to go do school pickup. So I just try to, I mean, I take little like Twitter breaks and stuff, but I don't usually take like a whole lunch hour or anything. I just try to use that time and be focused.
And I tend to get in the zone. I call it going down the rabbit hole, where I'll work for extended periods of time with very little interruption. And I have support from my family to do this, where I'm going to be working from 7 in the morning until 7 or 8 at night, and I'll get food delivered to me and that sort of thing, which is very helpful, so thank you. But I started writing my first book and actually sitting down and doing it and not just outlining it when my eldest daughter was homeschooled. And we had it set up so in the morning we would do our lessons and the kind of required things you have to do for homeschooling. And then the afternoon, when her younger sister was still at public school, her and I would either read or write. And so I'd write my book and she'd go and read or write songs or whatever she wanted to do. And that was just my time, and it worked out really well. So I'd like to thank everyone again for coming here. I appreciate it so much. We do have cake back there, and we'll have someone, my husband's, cutting it and serving it for you. But it has the cover on the front, or on the top of the cake. Also, make sure you sign up for Beth's drawing for her free audiobook. It's in a little glass bowl over there on the table. Other treats, books for sale. Obviously, check out all of Malvern's stuff. They have great things, and a sale coming up next month. So thank you, Malvern, for all of your help and support with my third book launch now. And thank you for coming and joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.